All right, and welcome into the next edition of the Vegas Squares podcast. Today will be baseball related because at the current moment, that is only one of the big four that is going on right now. And I know that for some that means that there's actually no sports going on, but there is a lot of money to be made in the books, and there's still a lot of action. There's great baseball going on right now. There's a lot of interesting takes going on, a lot of interesting storylines. If you're not following, we'll get you up to speed. I got a couple guys on the phone who know a thing or two about baseball, both on the field and in the books. I have Andrew, my buddy, Andrew Parks, who lives in Florida. He is with me on the podcast. Andrew, what's up, brother?
How you doing, Aaron?
I am well. I know we haven't talked in a while. You've been on previous podcasts before, and I think the last one we talked about was a baseball podcast when you were on. No?
I believe it was. It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah. And we've got a buddy of mine who's here in Las Vegas crushing the books, both in baseball and other sports as well. We have Chris Moon. Mr. Moon, what's up, brother?
Dude, how you doing, man?
I am doing well. How have you been doing? And I know you've been betting World Cup as well. How has the World Cup and the baseball betting been going?
Well, I'll tell you, the World Cup is a little bit tougher than I had anticipated. But, there's always today's action.
Fair enough. Yeah. Let me, before we start diving into some baseball, my first initial thought is today is the Argentina game, and it's their last chance to advance out of group play. And when I was actually watching some TV this morning, one of the talking heads mentioned that this may be our last chance to see Lionel Messi, in world events ever. Talking about a transcendent talent, my first thought was remember seeing Jordan for the last time and not really respecting it. But a guy like Messi, who's a global superstar, I mean, this may be the last time on a world stage we see him. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's been kind of a disappointing tournament for him. And, they are a heavy favorite today, but I could kind of see them, failing again. We'll see.
Yeah,
I know there's a lot of turmoil in the locker room with the coaches, and it's just, it's a mess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be sad to see a guy like that who, I mean, obviously we'll still see him, UEFA, Champions League, et cetera with that, but when another 4 years roll around, does he really have, the age and the talent at that point? This may be the last chance. All right, let's talk baseball at this point. And the big, speaking of a big superstar in their own league, is Andrew Kershaw came back and threw 3 innings against the Mets, for the Dodgers, who have been in a little bit of a hot streak right now. What are your thoughts on his return? I know it was only a couple innings, but just maybe the boost that it brought LA at this point.
Well, I think that it's a huge boost. I said this earlier to some friends how the third baseman was a huge boost. Justin Turner, right? When he came back, and now with Clayton Kershaw back, it's going to definitely help the locker room, calm the nerves of some of the other pitchers, and we'll see. I mean, Rich Hill is another guy who relies on Kershaw. They talk quite a bit, so I think that's definitely going to help that team. They're still battling, trying to catch the Diamondbacks, but we'll see how this season plays out.
Andrew, what do you think? I mean, at this point, the Dodgers have kind of had a hangover, so to speak, after losing Game 7. But they've seemed to turn on a little bit. And a thing or two about pitching. I mean, what is it like just to have your ace come back as far as morale and chemistry, et cetera?
Well, it's a huge boost and huge to the team's morale, obviously, to have a guy like Kershaw come back. Not only do you have your ace back on the mound, you've got a guy that can eat some innings. Hopefully he's going to be able to eat some innings after having the bicep tendonitis. But it's going to be interesting to see. I'm really looking at him because, the last 2 years he's lost time because of his back. This year he's lost time because of bicep tendonitis. And even before he went on the DL, he really wasn't the same Kershaw that we've been used to seeing. Kershaw usually puts up a 2.3 ERA. This year he was at I think 2.8 before he went on the DL. It's a half a run more he was allowing. Of course, any manager in the league would love to have that, but when you're Clayton Kershaw, you're used to giving your team a 1.8 ERA or a 2.1 ERA, a 2.3 ERA for the year. So I'm really anxious to see how he is going to come back. Is he going to be the same Kershaw that we're used to seeing? Nonetheless, even a just slightly worse Kershaw than he has been is going to be a huge boost to any rotation because of who he is and what he can do on the mound. I found an interesting statistic today when I was researching for the program. He's actually lost about 1.5 miles on his fastball since 2015. So I don't know if all of the innings are starting to take their toll on him, but like Chris said, it's going to be interesting to see what he's able to offer them here in the second half of the season. But no doubt it's going to boost the team. And they've started to go on a little bit of a roll. They didn't hit the ball well at the beginning of the year. I think that had a lot to do with Justin Turner not being in the lineup because, man, he was a stud last year.
Right.
But now they're starting to get everybody back and they're starting to roll. So, I look for them to be in the mix. They always are.
Yeah, and I look at their roster from top to bottom. Obviously, they acquired Kemp in the offseason, but for the most part, it seems generally the same. Bellinger, in my opinion, looking at that team, is not able to duplicate what he did in his rookie year, which, doesn't seem that far-fetched, but at the same time, I look at the rotation without Kershaw, it's not that great. Alex Wood had a decent year last year. Stripling's having a decent year, but those guys, Rich Hill and Maeda, are not duplicating what they did last year. The thing I look at right now, and Andrew, I'll get your opinion first, and then Chris, I'll ask you next, is you talked about Kershaw losing 1 mile to 2 miles off his fastball. Is Kershaw the type of pitcher that can transition into more of a Greg Maddux and use his location and his great curveball to more of his advantage than trying to overpower people at this point in his career? Because he is, I believe, 30, correct?
He is 30. Yeah, he is 30 years old this year. Kershaw, he does have the great 12-6 curveball. But the other thing that Kershaw was so phenomenal at was his location, which also, in the same article that I read, scouts were starting to see that his location was a little off, which then affected, his slider, which didn't have the same, effectiveness. But can he turn into a Maddux guy? I guess that remains to be seen, but, he's the type of guy that he's gonna set you up, for his devastating off-speed stuff and his breaking pitches. And, if he's losing a velocity on his fastball, he's got to be losing some velocity on those too. And they just won't be as devastating as they were before. But like I said, just a little bit worse. Kershaw is better than most of the pitchers in the league. But can he transition like David Price kind of is transitioning right now? He's lost the zip on his fastball he had when he was a rookie and when he won his Cy Young, and he's kind of retaught himself to be a different type of pitcher than he has been before. I guess that remains to be seen with Kershaw. I would guess, as good as he is, probably he's going to be able to make the transition.
Well, Chris, the books haven't adjusted quite yet. They still have L.A., usually a pretty good favorite at this point. So if you're laying the wood on L.A., a lot of times you're having to lay extra money for those recreational guys who aren't familiar. Laying minus money means you're laying the vig versus the sportsbook having to pay the vig at this point. Have you seen, when you're in the books, have you seen a lot of people still, rushing to the window to bet the Dodgers, or have we kind of taken a step back with that and looked to other teams to really funnel the money?
Well, you always see the public rushing to the books, betting those heavy favorites. what I've found after a bunch of years of experience is to not bet the side, but to actually bet the totals. That's really the way to bet baseball, in my opinion. Unless you really like these heavy favorites where you can bet the run line. But, yeah, I mean, you still see a lot of money going on the Yankees, the Astros, the Dodgers, all the big favorites are getting the money. And like yesterday with the Astros at minus 260, minus 270, they lost. I mean, and when you lose that, $270 to win $100, it's going to take you 3 bets to get that back, just to break even. So it's tough. You can't be doing that every day.
Yeah, losing, like you said, having to bet 270 favorites, and when Kershaw was on the bump, at least last year, I've seen upwards of 350 to close to 400 favorites.
Right, 350, yeah.
And you're right, you're having to win, you're having to up your percentage of betting, which we all know that betting those lines are hard enough as it is. You have to up your percentage of betting to almost 70-80% when you're attempting to make money off of those large favorites. Today, I mean, currently in action is the Nationals in Tampa Bay with I believe it's a doubleheader today. Actually, no, it's not. Scherzer's on the mound.
No, it isn't.
No, it's not. Scherzer's on the mound today at minus 215. They're already down 1-0. Your first fives are looking bad. Your game bets are looking bad. Now, I understand it's only 1 run, but you really start to, do you start to get more stressed out watching these games where you're laying, double your bet or more, sometimes even triple your bet, and your team is not performing, even if the pitcher may be.
Right.
So, Parks, I know you don't gamble as much as the two other guys on this podcast, but I mean, I know that you play a lot.
No,
I know you play a lot of daily fantasy where it's still allowed over there. What's the kind of the mindset, on, I want to go back to Kershaw briefly, but we'll talk about all aces like that. What's the mindset on paying, the more expensive price for a guy, no pun intended, on a DFS site, and then really having to watch games like this where, where betting is betting a team game or maybe an individual prop bet, but Scherzer's throwing really well right now, so individually betting him on DFS, it can be beneficial for you versus guys who maybe provide more value, like the Nathan Eovaldi. Same game I'm looking at. Eovaldi's pitching a gem right now as well, and I'm sure he's significantly less than Max Scherzer.
Well, the key to Major League Baseball is different than NBA and NFL. What your strategy should be in Major League Baseball is to come out ahead over a course of time, because baseball is so volatile. I mean, the greatest teams in the league lose 60 times.
Right.
So what you try to do in baseball is you try to give yourself the best chance to come out on top over the course of, say, 3 or 4 weeks. And by doing that, you have to play the trends. And the trends say that your aces, more times than not, are going to give you better production than taking a coin flip chance on a Nathan Eovaldi. So what I do is whenever I can, I pay up for pitching. On DraftKings, you have to pick 2 pitchers. It makes it a little tougher. On FanDuel, you only have to pick 1 pitcher. So in DraftKings, what I try to do is I pay up for 1 stud who I think is going to, mow down the opposition, and then I'll try to go for a mid-tier guy, or maybe even take a chance on, maybe a Goffman who I think might be able to, pitch well that day against whoever they're playing, or an Eovaldi or someone like that down in the $7,000 range, because you only have X amount of money to play. But by paying up for the pitchers, that then forces me to try to find the value back, which kind of separates me from the majority of people who play, because the majority of people who play always believe that you've got to pay for the value back because that's where the money is. But anybody knows Mike Trout can go for 6 any day of the week,
Right. Yeah,
Aaron Judge, Judge can strike out 5 times. I think was it Stanton or Judge? I think it was Judge struck out 8 times in a doubleheader this year.
But you know, so what that does is it forces me to find those guys that are batting second that day. You usually don't hit second, you know, and their salary is really cheap. But those guys that are hitting at the top of the order that day, maybe guys that have hit a particular pitcher really well in their career, but they're not a superstar. You know, one year, there was a hitter, left-handed hitter for the Cubs. Can't remember his name, but he was 8 for 8 against, Mike Leake. And so you look for those type of guys that, see, I can't even remember the guy's name. You look for those types of guys to fill in your roster, and hopefully over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, you know, you're ahead. Does that make sense?
Yes, I actually would agree with you, because when I look at it, and Chris, I don't know if you look at it the same way, when I look at it from a sports betting standpoint, I really feel that you talked about the trends, Andrew, and that's really where sports betting plays a role. Trends play a role in sports betting, because over the course of 162 games, players are going to take games off. Managers might take games off. Pitchers may, you know, not come out as fresh as they were 5 days ago. You know, a lot of people like to employ, Chris, a chase system in baseball, and maybe not necessarily on these 220s like we're starting to talk about, or the 260s in Houston.
I certainly don't do a chase. I'm not a fan of that.
Okay, so in your position, you know, and I'm not here to judge anybody whether they want to do the chase, or I know you've been making a profitable living at it for at least the time that I've known you. So what system do you tend to employ if it's not chasing trends or chasing a series or even betting a single series?
Well, what I do is I actually look at the MLB stat sheet that comes out every morning with the pitchers, their last 5 starts, any streaks. Like I'll never bet a team to break a losing streak, or a bet against a team that's on a winning streak. I just don't do it. But I'm also not going to bet something minus 200 or more. I refuse to pay that price. I'm looking for somewhere in the like 140, 130 range. Minus 130, minus 140 is about where I like to go. And I'll do 2-team parlays, putting those two together, for the most part. I also, you guys were talking about batter pitcher matchups. That's definitely something that I look at. And like today, Jake Arrieta against the Phillies roster, they bat only 215 against him, and he's got 65 at bats. Another really good pitcher to use today would be John Lester against the Dodgers. The Dodgers hit 198 against Lester, over 116 at bats. So those are 2 teams that I'm kind of looking at. It's very tough to bet against the Yankees, but in this spot, Jake Arrieta, could be a good play today. The Phillies at home.
Well, yeah, absolutely. He's getting almost 2-1 in juice at this point. I mean, if I'm looking correctly, I believe the Westgate's got him. Let me look at it right here. The Westgate's got him at plus 205. So you can definitely scoop up some definite value with Arrieta against the Yankees lineup. He's actually performed pretty well. So that bodes well.
And Aaron, I like and Chris, I like what you said. You know, you just didn't say that they hit 198 against Lester. You said in 116 at bats, and that's the thing that a lot of, I think, gamblers and DFS players don't think is, you know, they look at the small sample sizes and they say, well, last time that this guy pitched one time against the Nationals and he dominated them, so he's going to have to dominate them this time. But that's not necessarily true. But that's why, even as a DFS player and you as a gambler, you look at the large sample size. When you have 116 at bats against a pitcher and they hit 198, man, that's target city right there, in my opinion.
Well, Chris, when you're looking at the numbers like that, what is the sample size large enough that gives you the best? What's the sample size large enough that you say, okay, this is, we like with Arrieta 198, And what is that number of at-bats or that sample size or that average that says this is where I pull the trigger? What's a good enough sample size? 100 at-bats, plus, minus?
So I go with 60 at-bats or more. And that's what I'm targeting.
It's about 2 games worth.
60 at-bats. I'm also, that's like 4 starts.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. You're right.
And I'm also looking at, the OPS. OPS against the Yankees, it's 582, which is very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're not getting a hard contact against them. The same thing with Lester. The Dodgers OPS over 116 at bats is 615. And then you can dive down to the actual hot and cold batter matchups individually, and you can see that Logan Forsythe 2 for 16, Grandal is 2 for 10. Turner's actually 0 for 16 against Lester.
That's surprising
so
because Logan Forsythe and Justin Turner usually murder left-handed. Is that against Arrieta?
That's against Lester.
That's surprising because those guys usually murder left-handed pitching.
Yeah, they don't touch Arrieta.
Lester.
Huh.
I'm sorry, they don't touch Lester.
Wow.
They don't molest Lester. Sorry, I had to get it in there.
The other thing too, Aaron, is some of the best teams in the league may not hit say left-handed pitching. The Red Sox for a long time this year really struggled against left-handed pitching. I haven't seen it lately, but I used to take left-handed pitchers and pitch them and actually target them against the Red Sox, which nobody would. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. The really astute players would. But what do they have? 52 wins on the season, but they didn't hit left-handed pitching all that well. So every once in a while, a left-handed pitcher that you wouldn't think would throw a really good game and score a lot of fantasy points against the Red Sox.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's 100%. Yeah.
So that provides both value to DFS. I'm assuming, Chris, that provides value to sports betting as well. When you see a trend like a team who is going to be juiced like the Red Sox have been this year, who can't hit left-handed pitching, that's another spot where you can find value, I assume.
Yeah. Well, for instance, the Nationals are 8 and 16 against left-handed starters this year.
I think Snell threw a gem against them yesterday, right? Blake Snell.
Yeah.
Blake Snell's amazing.
Yeah. And I got him yesterday at minus 120. I thought that was an absolute gift. It's just crazy.
Snell has
certain teams that can hit lefties and certain teams that can't.
Well, today Boston is minus 210, and LA, the Angels, is putting a lefty on the mound. We don't, like you said, haven't looked at the recent trends, but this may be a spot looking if we dove deeper where the Angels at plus 180 could have value. So, Andrew, that's a good point that you bring up. If a team struggles against a certain general category, not just a certain pitcher or just a certain team or just a certain, spot, in the game, just a certain major category like left-handed pitching, I already look right here and see that a team like Boston is laying almost 2-1 across the board, 175 at the lowest in some spots. That's a good spot in the day where Chris, a guy who looks day to day, that's a good spot where he can take an Angel team if he really likes some of the other trends or stats that pull towards Los Angeles.
Is it Heaney on the mound today? Is it Heaney? Andrew Heaney?
No, it's
John Lamb.
The silence of the lambs.
Okay.
So, all right.
The other thing is.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was just going to say the other thing to look at that I'm an Oriole fan, so I know my Orioles pretty well. There was a time there where they just couldn't hit right-handed pitchers that had really, really good sliders, like Chris Archer. Whenever Archer pitched against the Orioles, I'd always throw him out on the mound because I knew the middle of the order, they just couldn't hit the slider. If his slider was on that day, he was going to dominate him. That's something else I always look for, in fantasy day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move on. We'll probably come back to this. We talked about the Angels a little bit just a second ago, and there are 2 guys on the Angels, one trending upwards, one trending downwards. Let's start with the guy trending downwards. and that is Shohei Ohtani. He's had a very roller coaster rookie season at this point after all the fanfare of where's he going to sign, then the abysmal spring, then he came out pretty hot both pitching and hitting in the regular season, which turned around everyone's eyes off the abysmal spring, and now he's injured. And there's not really a timetable for the return. However, Andrew, if and when that return happens, there's been a couple rumors that he's only going to return as a position player. Is that the smart move by the Angels with all the money invested in him?
Well, I mean, they want some type of Ohtani, whether it's on the mound or in the lineup. And right now, his injury, which is a partial tear of the UCL ligament in his elbow, that's not good. I mean, what they're doing is they're waiting to see how it responds to stem cell treatment and platelet treatment, and if he still feels some discomfort, he may have to go under the knife, which is going to put him out till 2020. If he continues to feel that discomfort. The other thing is he could come back and just hit, which obviously won't be near as much wear and tear on his elbow as pitching, because and I know that pitching a baseball is an extremely unnatural act because our arms hang down to our sides. I know that sounds funny, but that's why softball pitchers can pitch forever and they don't get tired. Right. But is it smart to just hit him? I mean, if injuring him further by putting him on the mound is going to put him out till 2020, yeah. I mean, they've got to get some value out of him somehow. And when he went down, I mean, he had a slash line at 289, 372, and 535, which, again, any manager in the league would love to have that in the middle of their lineup. So it's like you said, it's a wait and see approach right now to see how his elbow responds to the treatment before he may have to go under the knife. And a lot of people are leaning towards the unfortunate fact that he may have to have surgery, which is bad because he was such an exciting player for Major League Baseball. I mean, we've never seen this since Babe Ruth. I mean, literally, we've never seen the things this guy was doing since Babe Ruth. Now, I'm not saying he's on par with Babe Ruth at all, but it was just an exciting thing for baseball, something new, something fresh. And to see this happen is, it's just a shame for the Angels and for Ohtani and for baseball.
Yeah. I mean, and now, Chris, I look at, the depth chart of the Angels right now, and realistically, offensively, Ohtani may not need to be in there, but the caveat is if you decide to pitch him, or if you decide, okay, well, we've got enough this year. What I see the weakness as being right now with the injuries they have with Tropiano out, Richards out, I think the rotation is a problem. But problem is that he's not coming back in the rotation this year. So if you're Mike Scioscia, I mean, what are you telling the trainers, the doctors? Are you asking if he can come back this year in either spot, or are you pretty much preparing for life without him for the rest of 2018?
I think they have to be preparing for him to just be a DH for the rest of the year, and then just see what happens with the stem cells. But that's what I think. I don't expect them to have him pitch at all the rest of the year.
Yeah, because I'm looking at, Mike Trout, not Mike Trout, Mike Scioscia seems to be the guy with the cat with 1,000 lives at this point. I mean, whether you believe he should have been fired or not, he's had some pretty successful and unsuccessful seasons here in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think this may be, the year where he has to, or the management has to decide, what the deal is. I look at the depth chart. You got Upton, Trout, Calhoun in the outfield. Pujols still gives you a little pop. Kinsler's still there. When Cozart comes back, he's a serviceable shortstop. If not, Andrelton Simmons till then. Third base may be their weak link and catcher with Maldonado and Valbuena. But, at the same time, I don't think, Ohtani's playing third with that arm, and I definitely know he's not catching at this point. So, I mean, Chris, what do you do, if you do come back? You said DH, but, I mean, Pujols has got to, take some days off as well, too.
Well, I think, maybe they can work him in at first base, and swap out Pujols there. When Pujols needs the day off, but you got to keep Ohtani in the lineup offensively if he's healthy enough to at least bat. So, they'll make it work somehow. You don't want to put him in the outfield because it's, again, the arm. So I would say maybe he's going to play a little first base,
Now that would be an interesting, solution to it. Andrew, that always seems like the low-hanging fruit, especially when catchers, their knees are giving out or their arms, now we've got a guy who plays pitcher and I believe usually shortstop, what does he play when he plays the position? I haven't watched the Angels most exclusively, but I think
he just DHs.
Just DHs. Okay. So
he just DHs. And go ahead.
Well, is that a situation where, Chris Young, who is a serviceable DH, but not necessarily a guy who you wouldn't take out for Ohtani, is that a situation where you go to Albert Pujols and say, look, I need to keep Ohtani's at bats in the lineup. I'm going to need you at your age to either play close to the rest of the games this year, or when you take days off, you won't be getting at bats. And now you're taking a guy who also has an incredibly large contract, who is hitting fairly decently. You're taking him out of the lineup. So, if anybody can kind of manage the egos, it's Scioscia. He's been, with this organization for, I believe, almost 20 years at this point. What do you do? Put yourself in the mind of Mike Scioscia, Andrew, and, how do you approach Ohtani if they say, look, he can only DH or he can't pitch anymore? How do you approach this team, with Pujols, et cetera, and try to make sure that you manage the egos of the players, especially guys like Albert Pujols?
Number one, I think Albert Pujols is as healthy as he's been in about 2 or 3 years. I think the foot problem is gone. He still can't run. I think he's the slowest guy in the league.
I think he's always been the slowest
but
guy.
I don't think it'd be a problem. I don't think the Angels become a terrible team with Albert Pujols at first base,
right.
Defensively. I don't think you lose all that much. Scouts and major league coaches, they have a saying where all they want their players to be at the end of the game is +1, which means, if you make an error, they make up for it at the plate, and make sure that you're +1. If you have an error, you're -1. But if you get a single or if you get an RBI, if you get a home run, then you're plus whatever. So by the end of the day, just be +1. And I think Pujols, he's been a decent fielding first baseman for his career. I don't think they lose much with him at first base. The interesting thing I found today in my research for the program was when Ohtani is DHing, the Angels are 19 and 15 as a team, which means over the course of the year, that's 91 and 71, which is probably good enough to get them a wild card. As a pitcher, they were 7 and 2, which was over the course of the year 126 and 36. So obviously he is much more valuable on the mound to them, or was, before he got hurt. When Ohtani plays as a pitcher or a DH, they're 26 and 17 as a team. That's 98 and 64 for a full season. But the interesting thing is when Ohtani's not in the lineup, they're a losing team. They're 11 and 12.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
So, yeah, that's 77 and 85 over the course of the year. So he's valuable to this team, obviously. The stats show it. So Scioscia's going to do, and the organization's going to do whatever they possibly can, as long as Ohtani's arm can hold up, to have him in the lineup. And if that means Albert Pujols is going to have to play first base and Ohtani's going to have to DH, that's the way it's got to be, because obviously the stats show he's valuable to them.
Fair enough. That's a good assessment. Chris, I look at the rotation, we've got Haney, Skaggs, Barria, Lamb, and Pena. Other than Tyler Skaggs, I don't personally know the guys at all. You two may be in a little more depth with them. They've got Richards, they've got Ohtani, they've got Tropiano on the DL. Trade deadline's coming up in a month. I look at some of the guys that could be on the move. Would the Angels be in the market for a pitcher, especially a frontline guy, maybe like Cole Hamels, if the Rangers are out of it? And the other one I'm looking at, and he was a lot of talk this offseason, was like Chris Archer of the Tampa Bay Rays. Could you see the Angels being in a play for one of these guys or somebody that, may not even be, rumored right now?
Well, the Angels are in a tough spot right now. With the way the Mariners have been playing, it's going to be tough for them to make a push for the playoffs. If Ohtani doesn't come back, I don't think they're going to spend the money to acquire a starting pitcher. It really all comes down to, is he going to come back even as a designated hitter for us? If not, like I said, I don't think they're going to do anything, and they might even sell off a little bit if they can.
Well, in that case, that would almost signal the end of Scioscia, I would say, and I would hope that they would make a push, especially, in Mike Trout's formative years. If they don't go starter at this point, and like we said, if they say, Shohei Ohtani will be done for this season in any capacity. Andrew, I saved this one for you, because it hits home. Could you see them packaging some kind of deal with picks, prospects? I mean, mostly prospects and maybe one of the players on their team that they have right now. Just say like a Kinsler and, shipping them over to Baltimore for Manny Machado.
Well, I don't think they're gonna, I don't think they need Manny Machado. They have Andrelton Simmons.
Right. But
Simmons,
you could move Machado to third at this point. At least for this half of the season.
Machado doesn't want to play third. Machado doesn't want to play third.
He also doesn't want to play in Baltimore either.
I don't know if he wants to play in Los Angeles. I think he wants to play in Boston. I think he wants to play in Chicago. I think he wants to play in those cities. I know he doesn't want to play. Well, I don't know that for sure. I don't know if he wants to leave Baltimore or not. He probably does. They've been hard this year.
Well, do you think do you think Simmons and or Cozart, when he comes back, can move to third?
Well, they got Cozart, they got Simmons, and they got Machado. That'd be again, you're talking about trying to manage egos. How would that work with Ohtani at DH even?
Well,
if Ohtani is,
we're looking in a situation where Ohtani's not coming back this year.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying. Chris talked about, maybe if Ohtani doesn't come back, looking at the pitching, we talked about Chris Archer. He's a guy who's an interesting story because, usually you look at pitchers like Cole Hamels who have one, year at a lot of money. Cole Hamels is owed 27.9, this year. So you prorate that for the rest of the year. But you got a guy like Chris Archer who can come in, a right-handed starting pitcher who can top this rotation. And he's owed 27.5 over the next 3 years total. So you got a guy who can be in complete control of him for the next 3 years until 2021. We talked about the pitching.
The other thing, they're not going to be able to swallow the salary of a Machado, so it'll just be for this year to get them to the playoffs and through the playoffs is what your question is?
No, not necessarily. Again, baseball, if you want to take on the salary, you can take on the salary. It's the luxury tax that a lot of these teams, and I don't see LA really in play for Bryce Harper next year. So I don't think they're trying to shed weight at this point because I don't think Bryce is coming, to LA. And if he does, I don't think it's going to be to the Angels. My situation is can you talked about the egos. I think Zach Cozart may be a guy who would be interested in playing third base. Andrelton Simmons, I think at this point in his career, he's not a bad player, but he should be pretty, good with maybe attempting a move over there. I think you could make a,
He won the Gold Glove. But Simmons was the Gold Glove winner last year, shortstop. Remember?
And that's
this
fair.
Is a guy that can play the position.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if these guys, if Scioscia can manage these egos and try to get them to, look at the ultimate goal, which is winning the West, winning a title, you don't think that maybe Cozart or Simmons would be willing to attempt a move to third base at that point if it meant bringing in a Manny Machado, even if it was only for half a year?
Well, Cozart's already playing third base.
If he is, I didn't see it, but okay.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. He's the third baseman, and that's why, that would really crowd that left side of the infield. I don't know how.
Cozart's only playing short right now while Simmons is on the DL.
Simmons is on the DL, but Cozart was the third baseman at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Yeah. And so you got.
I honestly don't see
Yeah, I honestly don't see Machado going to the Angels.
Can he come in
at all? I give that like no.
Why would you DH Machado? I mean, that guy, he was won the Platinum Glove, 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, that's the guy that you need to have on the infield, especially at shortstop.
If you feel like you can sign him long term, is it worth flipping Cozart or Simmons?
I don't think so. I mean, you've got two quality major league players at short and third right now, and that's what you look for in a lineup. You want to be solid 1 through 9. You don't necessarily have to have 3 or 4 superstars on your team to win the World Series. I mean, the Giants showed us that. The Kansas City Royals, they were there. They showed us that. You want to be solid 1 through 9. You don't need a Machado at that point. If you're going to sign a Machado, go ahead and do the frontline starter signing that you were talking about,
Well, see,
and let Machado go somewhere else.
And I think the frontline
Simmons is no slouch with the bat either. I mean, the guy could hit. He had a great season last year.
No, and I think the frontline starter is the way to go. But at the same time, I mean, I'm trying to figure out where that bat's going to come from of the numbers that Ohtani has been, that they've been missing. I want to look at Chris Young's stats here, and I can't imagine they're jumping off the page right now. I don't have it exactly, but let's see. He's batting 171 with 5 home runs.
Yeah, he's not having a good year.
So, I mean...
Chris Young, when has he ever had a good year?
He had a good year.
Chris Young is in the major leagues because he can hit against left-handed pitching. I mean, that's, he's a good bat to have off the bench late in the game against, a lefty reliever.
He was pretty decent in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken.
That was a while ago, right?
Well, no, of course. Yeah,
long time ago.
That was a long time ago. He wasn't very good in Boston. I know that. But my point is that, right now, there's nothing coming out of the DH position, and I understand Manny Machado may be a pipe dream, but I mean, there's a lot of other guys that could be on the move. Moustakas. I'm not saying you have to get a superstar, but I think you got to get a lot more than what Chris Young's providing at DH.
Well, I agree with that, but I think Machado just kind of clouds the whole situation. I don't like that at all.
Okay, let's take off Machado, Chris, and put in Josh Donaldson.
Well, yeah, that'd be an easier move, I think, because it wouldn't cost as much. And as far as prospects, Donaldson is, he's been hurt again. I don't think they, unless they're bringing him in simply as a replacement if Ohtani is done for the year. I don't think they mess with the left side of their infield. The left side of their infield when Simmons comes back is fantastic. Probably the best left side in the league, in my opinion.
Okay.
Defensively. So, I mean, I could see them going after Donaldson, because I think the Blue Jays are certainly in teardown mode at this point. Being in the American League East is very, very difficult with the Red Sox and Yankees, spending all that money, and really just there are no weaknesses on those teams. So you have to tear down and, give it a shot in another couple of years, just rebuild the farm system.
Well, and I understand that, and that's definitely an option, but I look at this from a situation of Mike Scioscia. He doesn't have a couple years. At least, I don't think he does. You never know with him, realistically. I just feel like at this point, he's got to be thinking, it's all or nothing right now. And if I, have to convince the GM to mortgage the future for the present, a guy like Donaldson could come in and play third. He also could come in and DH. I'm sure he could come in and play first. And then that gives Albert Pujols the days off in the field that he, probably needs at his age at this point. So I'm just really realistically looking at the reason I say this because we're looking at Mike Trout's formative years, and let's dive into Mike Trout at this point, talking about the guy who was trending upward. And is he? I mean, the easy question is, the two guys we talk about in today's game is Trout and Harper because, well, Trout's probably one of the best 5-tool players. Harper's also the next guy to get the massive deal. Mookie Betts may or may not slide in there depending on your preference for him. But is Mike Trout the best player we've seen in the last probably generation?
I think so.
What generation? How far back we going?
I mean, I think the last guy that we saw who played the outfield, who was able to do everything, and you may have a different opinion, but I think Griffey.
Yeah, Griffey.
You know,
of course, Bonds was Bonds, but Bonds was. It's so hard to talk about Bonds because of what he did to his body. But Griffey, yeah, I mean, jeez, that guy was something else.
But I mean, Griffey's best years were behind him in what, 2004? I think maybe even before that.
Probably, yeah.
Whenever he went to Cincinnati and really couldn't stay on the field. I mean, once he was in Seattle, he was maybe the greatest outfielder of all time at that point, depending on who you ask, arguably. But now we've got a guy who, and I know, Andrew, you have the stats. I mean, we're coming up, he's played 1,000 games at this point, and his stats are comparable to some of, if not most of the greats.
Yeah, I mean, he's up there through 1,000 games. He's got 224 home runs. A-Rod had 255, so he's 31 less than there. Bonds had 172, so he's got 50 more than him. Mays had 231, so about the same. And Mantle had 218, so he's got more than Mantle. He's putting his name in the conversation with some of the all-time greats. Not just great, but all-time greats. The legends. And, I mean, what he's doing this year, it's even, this is going to be his best, if he continues, this is going to be the best year he's had yet. And, they kept saying, the scary thing is he's still young. He's just going to get better. And, you sit there and you think, how can this guy get any better? And here we're seeing it. I mean, he's only 26.
Right.
Isn't that amazing? 26. And, he's the only guy in the history of baseball to be, 1 or 2 in the MVP voting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight seasons. And, last year he was 4th because he missed
40 games, 40 or so.
Yeah, 40 games. He was still 4th in MVP vote. So, and he won a Rookie of the Year.
Well, that's the crazy thing is he, last year when he played 114 games, he had 33 homers, 72 RBIs. There's a lot of guys in the league who play over 162 who would kill for that season. You're right. I mean, you look at his stats. He Rookie of the Year and also second in MVP that same season, which is pretty impressive. Then he finished second again. Then he won it. Then he finished second. Then he won it. I mean. Mm-hmm. And, Chris, I made a prep at the beginning of the year that I'm clearly probably going to tear up the ticket. Try to convince me I'm wrong at this point, but I bet that Trout would have under 36 home runs, and currently we're not even at the All-Star break. He's got 23. Should I just go ahead?
Yeah, you're done.
Should I just go ahead and light that one on fire?
I think you should definitely light it on fire. Put it out on the website, that you're burning this ticket. It's toast, man.
That's unfortunate. And that's the thing. And we talked about this.
Unless he gets hurt, and we never want to see anybody ever get hurt.
No, of course I won't tear up a ticket till a season's over. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm not rooting for an injury, even though I will say in the article that I wrote regarding this ticket on VegasSquares.com, I did say I was rooting for a 10-week injury that would, make this prop bet, pretty much all but good or all but, done. Andrew, the question I have, and like we were just talking, I don't usually spend a lot of time on one team. The reason I spent a lot of time on this team was because of Mike Trout and, all this success he's had regular season, all-star games he's been in every year. He'll probably be in it this year again, MVPs, etc. The playoff success just isn't there for him. And I don't know if that's necessarily a product of him, Mike Trout himself. I think that's a product of this team. And that's why I was thinking not only with Mike Scioscia's future, he is 26 and, that's not necessarily the prime, but his career looks like it's on track with Griffey's. It started very early where a lot of guys don't get to the league till maybe 22 to 24. And you're looking at maybe a prime of between now and 30 for Mike Trout versus most other guys prime is, 27, 28 to 31, 32.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Looking at his only, go ahead.
No, go ahead. My question basically was, you're starting to almost waste the formative years and the prime years of a Mike Trout, and do his postseason, inefficiencies start to weigh on him, when it comes to comparing him to the greats, because we all have the Jordan, LeBron, other guys, etc. And, LeBron's postseason mishaps or, his inability to finish is what's costing him that debate in some people's eyes. So I don't think anyone can doubt Mike Trout's ability, but, the ultimate goal of this game is to win World Series.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about baseball is, and it's been different than NFL or NBA or even NHL, is the World Series trophy has never been really as important as addition to a player's legacy as it is in NBA and NFL and NHL for whatever reason. And I don't know why that is. We always hear, Michael Jordan was 6-0 in the finals, and LeBron is 3-5 in the finals, 3-6 in the finals.
3-6 now. Yeah.
And, we hear Tony Romo never won a ring, and, we were wondering, most of us were rooting, you weren't, but most of us were rooting for Ovechkin to get his ring. And you just don't hear that type of talk with baseball for whatever reason. And I don't know why that is. Ernie Banks, he never won a ring, but yet Ernie Banks is known as one of the top 5 greatest shortstops of all time, and nobody would question that. No one ever brings up, well, he never won a World Series championship. They don't talk about that in baseball. So if Mike Trout never gets a ring, he's still going to be one of the greatest players that ever played a game. And no one's going to say, well, he never won a ring. I'm looking at his postseason stats. He was in the postseason once, 2014. They played, Kansas City, and he was 1 for 12. And that one was a home run.
Right.
So, he wants to get there because that's why they play. He wants that world championship, but as far as, is it going to be is he going to have a tainted legacy because if he doesn't ever get there and never win one? No, not at all. Not in baseball.
Well, I mean, Chris, pre-steroid, to piggyback off of that, the pre-steroid confirmation, allegation, etc., a guy like Alex Rodriguez would consistently get to the playoffs and then have, playoff numbers almost like Mike Trout here has in his one lone series. So we talked about, Alex Rodriguez amongst the greatest, of all time, even without the postseason batting. Is it just because this sport, and I know there's 53 guys on a roster in football, there's 27 in baseball, or 25 in baseball, 26 or 7 usually in hockey, give or take, and basketball, there's obviously less. But it seems like, this is the sport where each individual guy is relied on a lot more than the collective unit, the collective unit is relied on a lot more than each individual guy. I mean, with the exception of David Ortiz in the 2013 World Series.
That's definitely the case. You got to have somebody on the mound that's going to be able to get people out consistently. And the Angels, they haven't had the starting pitching to get them where they need to go. Which is why I think, if the Angels were a smart organization, they would try to package Mike Trout. I know it's a terrible thing to say.
Go ahead, hot take alert.
And try and trade Trout for just a boatload of, young talent. I know he's only 26, but what you got right now it's not getting it done, and you got to make the hard choices sometimes. And, if you can get a king's ransom for Mike Trout, you go ahead and you do it, and you tear down.
Like a Herschel Walker to the Vikings kind of trade.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
good luck getting that.
You might be onto something there. I mean, most of the times deals like that, don't necessarily involve a lot of ready now players. So, I mean, when you talk about a king's ransom, you're looking at prospects that may or may not pan out. I mean, do you think Mike Trout could be a guy that actually gets ready now players?
He could, and he should. I mean, imagine him like going to the Braves. The Braves have a ton of AAA talent ready to come up. They got this kid that plays third base. I forget his name, but they've been clamoring that they're thinking about going after Manny Machado, but maybe just for 1 year until this guy's ready, because Camargo's not getting it done. But I mean, imagine Mike Trout going to the Atlanta Braves right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pair him with Acuna when he comes back at the end of the week.
Yeah, Freddie Freeman.
Arte, and I mean, that'd just be amazing. Something like that could make some sense.
Now, Andrew, can you see? Oh, sorry.
Ultimately, I don't see it happening, but it's a dream.
Well, let's live in that fantasy world for a second and say that the Angels don't believe that they can compete, or the Mariners are just too far ahead, and you have the Astros there as well. Let's look at possible, a situation where Mike Trout could be moved. I know that, again, that's pretty crazy, but, can you see Mike Trout coming to the East Coast and becoming more of a superstar than he already is, really? Because I think a lot of times he gets missed in his talent because a lot of you guys that are 3 hours ahead of us don't get to see him as much.
I mean, sure, he could come to Mike Trout's going to be a superstar wherever he goes. The one problem in baseball when you do package deals is you never ever know which prospects are going to be able to make the leap to the big leagues and who can't.
Right.
That's one of the tricky things about baseball, and that's what makes it so much different than the other sports. Going back to that Vikings Dallas Cowboy trade, Jimmy Johnson knew, who, when you take guys in the first and second and third round in NFL, for the most part, linemen, defensive guys, that they're going to be able to produce on the NFL level. When you get quarterbacks, it's a little different. Sometimes running backs is a little different, but for the most part, what you're getting. In baseball, you don't always know. So they could do that. They could give it a shot. They could do the package deal and try to get some prospects. There are some prospects in AAA right now. Chris mentioned one, the Braves guy. I think his name's Austin Riley. Is that who you were talking about, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's his name. Yeah.
And Vlad Guerrero's kid. I mean, he's ready for the show right now, and I don't know why they're not bringing him up. But there are certain guys or can't miss. But then there's a lot of other guys that you don't know if they're going to be able to make the adjustments when they get to the pros. So packaging a Trout for prospects, it's hit or miss more times than not in baseball. Look at all the trades. Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this, and you talk about trades. Is there any scenario, and I know the initial thought, but is there any scenario that trading Trout, getting the right haul, makes the Angels better? Immediately.
I don't know for this year. No, definitely not. But I mean, if you look, maybe the Phillies could make sense. The Phillies could trade like Odubel Herrera, Scott Kingery, and maybe 3 prospects that are AAA ready. And maybe a first round pick. Mm-hmm. Trout goes to Philadelphia. It's very close to New Jersey. Something like that, where the Angels are getting some major league players back. Herrera is pretty good.
Yeah.
And Kingery has been a good surprise, I guess. And he is a first round pick that is finally, playing well. So you get some depth, and maybe it works. I don't know.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about staying in the East. We'll add the Astros in it as well. We've got 3 teams right now that could potentially win 100 games, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that's ever happened before. And 3 teams right now on pace. Andrew, you're an AL East guy. I think actually we're all AL East guys. I know Chris is from Massachusetts as well, and we're all AL East guys at this point. So, I mean, take the Yankees, take the Red Sox, add the Astros in that. Is it a real possibility that we could have 3 teams with 100 or more wins this season?
Well, it's always a possibility. I mean, I was looking at the Houston Astros roster. I gotta say, without some major injury to one of their 5 starters, I think they might be a slam dunk 100-win team. I mean, when you got Charlie Morton as your number 5 pitcher,
yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, the guy's 9-1 with a 2.7 ERA. He's probably going to make the All-Star team. He's their number 5. And then you look at the lineup, and there's no weaknesses. I was talking before. The teams that go deep into the playoffs are the ones that they really don't have any weakness 1 through 8 or 1 through 9 in their order, and they've got some arms. Well, I mean, the Astros really don't have much weakness in their lineup or in their pitching rotation and their bullpen. Looking at the Red Sox, again, they've got 4 frontline starters. Pomeranz is on the DL. He's also, he can pitch. He pitched really well with San Diego. But you've got Sale, Urshela, Price, and Erod, and then Pomeranz when he gets back. I mean, again, 4, 5 top starters, and then, of course, the lineup.
Hey, don't forget Stephen Wright now.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Stephen Wright, the knuckleballer. He's come in and he's pitched really well. 2-1 and 40 innings. He's given them 40 innings already. So, yeah, they've got the arms, and they've got the offense. And, of course, Mookie Betts is really coming into his own this year. In that article I'm writing for you, Aaron, ranking the top 30 players in Major League Baseball, I've got him in the top 5 easily right now. And so, yeah, they have a great lineup. The one team that I'm not buying is the Yankees. I don't think they're going to have 100 wins by the end of the year. Just looking at their rotation, I mean, Severino's been lights out. He's in the talk for Cy Young, but after that, Sonny Gray's done so. CC, he continues to pitch, and even at 37, I mean, he's pitching really well.
They got to get
Tanaka. Yeah, he's on the DL. And Tanaka, he's interesting because you never know what you're going to get with him. He's either going to, give you a gem for 7 or 8 innings, or he's going to get lit out in 2 or 3 innings. It's funny. The Jermaine, I don't know, the German or Jermaine guy.
Probably Herman.
He's come in. German, he's done okay, but again, he's not anyone that they're going to want to rely on down the stretch. And then Jordan Montgomery, I've always liked that guy. I like how he pitches. I like those crafty lefties.
Yeah, well, don't get used to him this year. I think he had Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, he's out. Completely?
He's done.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
He's done. So
they were scouting Jay Happ up in Toronto, and I think that's who they're going to go after.
So, Chris, let me ask you.
They'll get somebody.
Chris, let me ask you. He talked about a little bit of what he doesn't like. Talk to me about the reasons or the weaknesses that these 3 teams may not get to that 100-win plateau.
Well, the Astros are just amazing. The only weakness I see in that team is the back end of the bullpen. They need to upgrade Giles because he certainly he's proven that he can't do it in the big games. In the postseason, they had to use Charlie Morton and a lot of the starters to close out games because they don't trust him.
Yeah, but don't you love him bashing his head against the dugout and stuff? I love the blow-ups by him. So I'd like to keep him just for the theatrics. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, maybe he can join Hunter Strickland and they can try and punch lockers and doors after blown saves.
There you go.
Just like Hunter Strickland.
Chris, do you think Brad Peacock might be a guy they look at to pick up the closer role?
Hasn't Davinsky been closing?
Well, I think Giles is still closing, but I think the Orioles are going to be the team that's going to be trading pieces.
Zach Britton.
Either Britton or Brock could end up there.
Britton is back too.
Yeah,
Britton is back.
Britton would be nice in the back end of that rotation, or the back end of that bullpen. Yeah,
that's what I think they're going to do. I think the Orioles are tearing down.
Yeah, you're right. I look at Houston's lineup, and I just don't see a weakness as long as they all stay healthy. I mean, shoot, I would say their worst proposition is Gurriel, and he's even playing pretty well at this point. Brian McCann's playing pretty well for a catcher, and his career's been resurrected in Houston. I look at, like you said, the back end of Houston's, bullpen. I look at the bullpen with the Yankees is almost, that 7, 8, and 9 with Robertson, Betances, and Chapman. His with the exception of Chapman's always has the fun ending, but I look at the Yankees and I understand what you're saying. If once they get Gary Sanchez back, with Tanaka back, that's a very formidable lineup at this point. I think the weakness with the Yankees and it's the low hanging fruit is their entire lineup swings the bat and misses way too much.
Well, that's the game now.
They certainly do.
Everyone's preaching that, launch angle these days and, swing from the heels with 2 strikes. And so.
That's got to drive you nuts as a baseball coach.
Nobody really cares about the strikeouts anymore, which I have, I'm on the fence about. Obviously, the Cubs, the year they won the World Series, they had a lot of guys that swung and missed. But then like I mentioned the Royals before, the year the Royals got there, they put the ball in play. They showed everybody that a team that can still put the ball in play and play like it was in the 1980s again can still, be successful in this day and age. But they do strike out a lot. I mean, Aaron Judge and Stanton already have 100 strikeouts each. And, when we were growing up, when I was a kid, 100 strikeouts, 110 would lead the league. And they already got 103 and 104. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is absurd. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I know in one of the articles you've been writing, not specifically the one for Vegas Squares, you're talking about guys back in the league. Ted Williams struck out 3 times in 162 games or something like that.
That was Frankie Frisch, I believe. No, Joe Cronin, I think it was.
Okay.
Struck out 3 times. Yeah, he struck out 3 times and something like 650 plate appearances.
So
yeah, I mean, it's a different game now.
So let's look at these 3 teams right now. And Chris, I mean, we talked about a little bit with the trading, the trade deadline with the Angels. Is there a move, like you talked about Britton, first thing you talked about was Britton in the back end of the bullpen. Is there another move that you could see that any of these teams don't necessarily have to make, but you see them making at this point?
The Orioles are definitely tearing down. I think Adam Jones is another one that may go. He could help somebody.
He's not going AL East, though, I would assume. They're not going to stay in the
AL East. They don't need a center fielder. I don't know where he would end up. Atlanta doesn't need an outfielder. Unless it's Mike Trout, then they can definitely upgrade there. But
yeah, anybody can find a spot for Mike Trout, absolutely.
Yeah, but I can't. I mean, I could see maybe Adam Jones going to the Phillies. The Phillies then move Herrera to right field. You got Rhys Hoskins playing left, so that would be one scenario.
I'm just looking at these 3 teams right now: Houston, New York, and Boston. Is any upgrades that they could actually make, or any weaknesses that you see that they may need to address here in the next month? I look at the Yankees right now, and Neil Walker, Chase Headley. Nothing of that worked at third base right now. You look at a guy like Mike Moustakas, who royally screwed himself over last offseason. And may be itching to say, hey, look, I'd like to go to a contender and a team who may pay me next year. And, I mean, the Yankees have a hole at third base, in my opinion, right now.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
But right now, they have Andujar at third base. Walker's been playing first.
Right. No, I understand that. I mean, the Neil Walker project didn't really work out, and Greg Bird hasn't been that
and
great.
Greg Bird hasn't panned out either. No.
Yeah, I mean,
first base is their big problem. Third base is not a problem.
Okay, so can Moustakas come in and play first at that point?
He could, yeah.
Or even, Josh Donaldson. I don't think Toronto would trade him again to an AL East team. But that's another guy who is probably on the market at this point. You talk about, guys who could play multiple infield positions. And, you're right. Greg Bird just really hasn't panned out now that I look at his stats. But it's been a few years. It's been a few years with him.
Josh Donaldson's an interesting name because, he may be transitioning to first base anytime pretty soon because of all the trouble he's been having with his shoulder. I mean,
right.
That's what's really been ailing him.
He's a free agent at the end of the year as well, right?
Right. I believe so. I think he's got either that or an option year. Yeah. So, I'm just looking at, a lot of these guys. Once Gary Sanchez comes back, the catcher position solidified. Gregorius has been, a breath of fresh air for the last 2 years now. I mean, I look at, other than the fact that they swing and miss a lot, which Andrew's calming me down off the ledge that says it's not as bad as I'm maybe making it out to be. Because this team essentially did get to the ALCS, and correct me if I'm wrong, they got to Game 7 of the ALCS last year. So, I mean, they're not far off of, the course, and they're only really looking to get better at this point. Gleyber Torres, or Gleiber, however you say it, has come in this year and been pretty good for the New York Yankees. And I'm just trying to, I'm just basically trying to play devil's advocate and find a hole in here. And, not saying that any of these guys are bad. I mean, Boston realistically could upgrade their bullpen and or their catcher position, which they're not going to. But if they had to, if something just blew them away, I can see that situation. So we'll see over the next month. Most of the time the Yankees are in play even when they don't need to be in play. You know what I'm saying, Andrew?
Oh yeah, I agree completely. I
also think Adrian Beltre could be in play with the Rangers.
You think
he could end up back in Boston? You never know. Devers has been kind of a sophomore slump, disappointment. That's really the only spot where the Red Sox could use an upgrade as third base.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Devers has been. He's had a little bit of an adjustment period. I would agree with that as well. He's let's see, I'm pulling up his stats right here, and he's only hitting currently
like 250 or something.
He's hitting 235 right now, and that's a fair assessment. I don't know if you want to shatter the guy's confidence right now. I mean, depending on how he operates. I mean, according to some reports out of Boston, they did cut his best friend on the team in Hanley Ramirez. So who knows? Cutting the best friend and then benching him for a 40-year-old guy who, let's face it, still has some pop. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay Adrian Beltre. I just, with Devers being, I think he's only 22 or something like that.
21.
Yeah, 21. You don't necessarily maybe not want to shatter his confidence at this point. So, but you never know.
I don't know what's Jackie Bradley.
I don't know. You tell us.
Hitting 189. I didn't know it was that low. I knew it wasn't here, but 189, 4 home runs, 17 RBI. Wow. 66 strikeouts,
yeah, he's
22 walks.
Defense. That's about it.
I was going to say, he's got to be in there for defense.
Yeah, he does Gold Glove defense, that's for sure. Yep.
The two guys.
I don't know, that just popped out looking at the roster.
The two guys that bookend him are playing pretty well, so he gets to hide in that a little bit. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think ultimately what they're going to do is move Benintendi to center and put JD in left.
You think
then
so?
What you could do is Benintendi plays almost as good defensively in center as Jackie Bradley. JD can play kind of like Jim Rice in left field going way back. If you can play the wall, left field is not that difficult to play in Boston as long as you can play the wall.
Right.
Not much ground.
Or the monster.
Not much ground.
Not a lot of ground.
Right.
Not a lot of ground, especially with Betts and right and Benintendi could cheat over to left center. That's something to think about.
All right. Well, let's talk about, we've talked about the three teams. They do sit atop of a lot of future betting odds at this point. Currently, according to, I'm looking at Vegas Insider right now, the Houston Astros and New York Yankees are 4-1. Red Sox are 7-1 at this point. Chris, you look at the board, right now. Obviously, we can probably take out Baltimore and guys like that. But who are some value plays right now that you could see? I'll start it off. My team right now that I really like, and they're still 18-1 right now, but last time I saw them and picked them up, it was 30. That's the Arizona Diamondbacks. Are there any teams that you look at across this board that you think has a chance to not only get into the playoffs, but get to the World Series and potentially win it?
Well, yeah, what about the Milwaukee Brewers? I mean, they're in first place in the Central. They have a lineup that is a great lineup in the National League. They could use the starting pitcher, for sure. But that's a solid lineup if they can get rid of Arcia at shortstop. Maybe they upgrade at shortstop, find a starting pitcher. That's a team, in my opinion, that could make some serious waves, as well as the Atlanta Braves, who I talked a little earlier with Acuna coming back. Their pitching is young, but they are an interesting bunch with Freddie Freeman.
Andrew, you mentioned Seattle and how well they're playing. They currently sit at 14-1 to win the World Series. Do you feel like that may be a value play right there, as far as getting 14-1 on your money for a team that probably is going to take the wild card, may even take the West at this point?
I mean, it could be. Looking at their team, obviously, when you get into the playoffs, it's all about the arm. We've seen teams just roll through the playoffs that have great bullpens and maybe just two or three frontline starters. And looking at their, Jim, the Paxton kid he's got about the best stuff as there's anybody in the league right now. I mean, he had the no-hitter earlier this year. That's a guy that could really lean on when the playoffs come around. But after that, they've got Felix Hernandez, who's shown some chinks in the armor this year, Marco Gonzalez, and Wade LeBlanc. So, I don't know if they have the arm really to get through the playoffs and to the World Series at this point. But we've seen trades before really turn teams around. If they get a starter, who knows? Because once you get to the playoffs, as I said, you really only need 2 or 3 starters. I mean, the year the D-backs won it, they had Schilling and Johnson.
Right.
And, they just mowed through everybody. But that was Schilling and Johnson, 2 Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. So I really think the Mariners need another pitcher, another frontline guy, an ace. I don't think they have the arms right now to get all the way to the World Series.
That might be a spot where a Chris Archer or Cole Hamels could really help immensely at that point.
I don't know. I don't know if those 2 guys are the answer. I mean, you never know which Archer you're going to get when he goes to the mound.
All right, but if the guy's available, I mean, you're not obviously going to pick up the phone and call over to DC and be like, hey, what's Max worth at this point? Because they're gonna hang up the phone.
Yeah, of course.
So
right.
Speaking of the Big Maple, you can get him at -140 today for those who like to gamble.
Who's the Big Maple?
-140 for Paxton against the worst team in the American League East, the Baltimore Orioles. How can you go wrong there, right? -140.
Well, it's against Gauss.
-140.
It's against Gaussman, the guy that Parks likes.
He sucks. Come on. He's that team is just terrible. It's just a terrible team.
I've really seen some plays this year that I've really never seen from an Orioles team in a long time. I just don't know what's going on in that. And what the funny thing is, and I don't want to get off on the Orioles because we're talking about teams that, might win.
Winning teams?
But it all went downhill ever since that game where Buck did not bring in Britton in the, I think it was the wild card game, and Britton sat on the bench the entire game, and I think the game went 12 innings. He brought in Ubaldo, who gave up the winning runs in the 12th or the 13th inning, and Britton never even got to sniff them out. And ever since that game, everything's just kind of gone downhill. I saw a really funny stat when I was doing research, and it said that Mike Trout could go 0 for 400 and still have a higher OPS than Chris Davis. So, I mean, that's how bad this team is right now. It's unbelievable. Yeah. But
the crazy thing is, on paper, they don't look that bad. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, Scope came into his own last year. Adam Jones has been a perennial 30 homer, 90 RBI guy. You've got Machado. You've got Chris Davis, who hits 40, 50 home runs in the major leagues. I mean,
Trumbo, same thing.
Trey Mancini. Yeah, Mancini's a good, a good player out there. They still have a decent bullpen. One of the things that a lot of people haven't pointed to that I've looked at and talked about with people is the one guy that we lost that no one's talking about that could have been a bigger loss than people think is Matt Wieters. Matt Wieters kept that rotation and kept that bullpen together. I mean, he was a heck of a defensive catcher. Now we've got Chance Sisco, who's a rookie, and he's struggling defensively. Caleb Joseph. And I think, it just goes to show you when you take out the backbone of the team, who I always thought the catcher was the backbone of the team, it could just completely destroy a season. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Orioles. But anyway, I don't want to get off on the Orioles. I'm disgusted with it.
Very underrated assessment. A lot of rotations do credit their catchers in that spot.
Yeah. And, I mean, Cashner and Cobb, those guys are better pitchers than they've shown. Dawson's a better pitcher than he's shown. Bundy's had some great games, but I don't know.
All right, we'll talk about the Orioles really again when they're legit. So we'll see. We'll see in a decade.
2,000 years, 2030.
So, all right. Well, there's a couple more value picks. I know we had some on an article on Vegas Squares. We checked that out. I have some value picks that I picked, but Chris gave us the Milwaukee Brewers, which I didn't have. We talked about Seattle a little bit. Overall, there's some definite value in a lot of these teams that still are definitely being underappreciated by books at this point. I think the reason Milwaukee's being underappreciated by the books is because the public really loves Chicago. The public really loves St. Louis at this point. So I think Chris might be onto something with the Brewers there. You can definitely grab value. They're not placing them too far out of the stratosphere. They're still right now, I think I said 14-1 at this point. They are, according to Vegas Insider, they are 16-1. So again, some good value, not astronomical value. The Phillies are another team. The Braves sit here 25-1 still currently on Vegas Insider. So
I love the Braves.
Yeah, I mean, if they can get in, even
the Braves, I think, yeah, I think the Braves have a shot to actually come out of the National League this year. That's how high I am on them.
There you go.
Call me crazy.
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, related to this, I think you're crazy normally, just knowing you personally. But all right, well, dare I say it, here we are in June the 26th. I will ask you, gentlemen, just for reverting back purposes. Andrew, I'll start with you. Looking at, 3 months into the season, give me your World Series prediction.
My World Series prediction. You caught me off guard, but I'm going to say Cleveland because I think Cleveland's offense and they've got 3 frontline starters as soon as Carrasco gets fixed and better, which he should be. I don't know if he's back pitching yet or not, but he should be fine. Cleveland and I hate to say Chicago, but I'm gonna have to say Chicago, the Cubs.
All right, it's an interesting take after watching 3 months of baseball. I think we lost.
Well,
I think it was a walk-off.
I'm trying to look for that one, that dark horse, and so you guys can look at me as a genius here in a couple of months. But I mean, the Cubs have the pitching. Cleveland has the pitching, and they've got the lineup too. Of course, we praised Houston. Houston's got 5 starters that could roll out there. I mean, you got to say Houston and Cleveland are going to be in the AL finals, and then Chicago. So I'm going to say Chicago and Cleveland.
Okay. So we'll either look back at you as a genius or we'll look back at you and laugh because you reached for the low-hanging fruit,
right.
Preseason low-hanging fruit. I think Cleveland's got a benefit of not having to really be that good this year, considering their division.
Well, they never have to be. You're right.
Detroit, Minnesota have had some good years. Anyways, Chris.
Well, I'm going to go with the low-hanging fruit with the Astros. Like I said, the only weakness I see is the closer situation, and I think they go get Britton. They make it all the way again, and they repeat. As far as the National League, I have futures on both Atlanta and Milwaukee. Milwaukee from before the season started. I love what they did, getting Kane and Yelich. I think they're going to go and they're going to pick up a starter, like Chris Archer. So I'm going to say the Brewers come out and they are going to dethrone the Cubs in the Central and make it to the World Series. Houston and Milwaukee are my 2 picks.
Fair enough. 4 good picks right there. I think I'm not going to reach for necessarily low-hanging fruit. I think I'm going to reach for the home team. I think Boston's going to make it out of the American League. I think they've got a good bullpen, which you said that the Houston Astros may be their weak link, and they may or may not be able to get Britton at that point. I think it's still a good possibility considering it's a fire sale. But, however, I saw that bullpen in the World Series, and if the Dodgers bullpen didn't have to play tit for tat with them, the Dodgers probably should have won that series. I'll take the Red Sox to get out of the American League this year with bats and pitching, and I think they're going to face the Arizona Diamondbacks in the World Series this year. I think with Shelby Miller coming back, Robbie Ray coming back, with that rotation they have, Goldschmidt's going to lead the team right now. They've got a couple guys coming back off of injury that are going to be definitely formidable in that lineup. Arizona is going to be the National League representative, in my opinion. And also, I'm a little biased because it's the closest team to Vegas in the MLB. Then I would like to see some World Series games this year.
I like the Diamondbacks as well. I have a futures on them.
All right, so let's...
But you know me, I'm the action guy, so here we go.
Yeah, there you go, absolutely. So, gentlemen, I appreciate you both coming aboard. Andrew, thanks for taking time out of your busy summer schedule to join us on the podcast.
I'm a school teacher. I'm not busy this summer.
I know, that was my point. And Chris...
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Chris, I know you had to leave the sports book over at the Mirage for about 90 minutes, and we appreciate you taking your time out of watching 80-inch or 80-foot giant screens for about an hour and a half to come do this with us.
Not a problem. Enjoyed it.
So, all right. Well, that has been Andrew Parks and Chris Moon. We've been talking baseball for about 90 minutes. I think we planned this to be a 20-minute podcast, and you see where that left us. Hopefully, you didn't turn it off after 20 minutes. But we thank you very much for tuning in to another edition of the Vegas Squares podcast. Spike and Anthony will be back once Spike gets back from the East Coast and Anthony returns from his working 2-job coma at this time of the year. So for Spike, for Anthony, for Chris, for Andrew, I am Aaron. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.